Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. It's been 4-5 months in the making because we got delayed a couple of times. But yeah, my name is Damola and I'm a product designer currently at Spotify. I've been doing design for a while. I joined Spotify a little under 2 years ago. And yeah, that's me, basically. Very simple, product designer, nothing else. But yeah, at Spotify, what I work on is mostly around playing. So it sounds very, very weird when I say it's about around playing. But yeah, I worked in playing experiences, which is basically when a user taps on something, what happens? You play stuff, long and short of it. But right now, I'm currently working on curation and retrieval, which is not a very fun thing for everybody, but it's like when you save something, where does it go to? Your library. But yeah, let's move on. So, check of hands, how many of us work on design systems here? Some point in the time, quite a number of people. How many of us use design systems or have used at any point in time? Okay, so the talk is for you. Yeah, so what's a design system? That's it. The design system is a collection of reusable components and clear standards that can be assembled together to build any number of applications. Fancy and fantastic stuff even. But why are we here? A typical thing is, more often than not, we get a lot of talks about design systems from people that work on this stuff, the people that actually build the systems, right? And we talk about components, we talk about foundations, we talk about tokens. We love tokens. We talk about colors and icons, right? But there are actual human beings that use this thing every single day. Like every product, like Spotify, there are people that use Spotify. I work on it, and sometimes I get carried away and forget that there are actual human beings using my product, right? And I think it's somewhat similar with design systems, right? It's very easy to go, oh, I'm creating a bunch of components and a bunch of stuff. But the people using it work with you every single day. Like, those are your users, right? So design systems are pretty much like any product. The difference is that the product lives in code, more often than not, and sometimes it lives in Figma, most times. So how do you treat a product? How do you treat your users? Typically, you want to hear what your thoughts are. You want to know what they think about your product, what they feel about your product. And you also want to hear their point of view more often than not. Because really, there's no product if your users' voices are not heard, right? So for this talk, basically, I'll be talking about design systems from the point of view of myself and a couple of designers I spoke with, maybe like 5 of them, to understand some of the things that they had done in the past, what they like about their design systems or the design systems they've used in the past, what did they enjoy about them. And the very first thing is onboarding. I think it's pretty much the most important part of any product. How do you get users on your product? How do you get them using your product? Has anybody ever designed any onboarding experience before in the past? Please raise your hands, please. Okay. It's one of those things that we tend to overlook because most times we work on the core product in itself, and then down the line, like, oh, so when we get a new user, how does this new user use the product? But the question is, what is onboarding? Onboarding is basically getting somebody introduced to something and getting them familiar with a particular thing. And who is it for? From design systems point of view, your onboarding is typically for your engineers and your designers, but it's easy to get carried away. And I'm going to talk about it from 2 points, right? The first point is when you're releasing a fresh design system, and that means we're releasing something new for the team currently. And what that means is that we would sometimes think, we've built this fantastic stuff, we shared with the team already, that we're doing this, we've gotten buy-in and everything. But now we're sharing with the team that we're done. This is what you need to use or what you should be using. That is typically very, very smooth and straightforward. But there's a flip side. When new team members join your team, when you get a new designer, when you get a new engineer on your team, how do you get them introduced to the system? How do you get them using the system? How do you get them familiar with specific things, right? This experience can vary, and can vary because people's familiarity with design systems can also vary. When I joined Spotify, I worked at a number of startups. So we had style guides. We didn't really have design systems because we were typically like maximum of 10 designers, so it wasn't necessary, right? When I joined Spotify, I saw this huge design system with more designers working on the design system than I had worked with designers in the past ever. And it was quite challenging, right? It was quite something. So yeah, I had a couple of problems, and then we needed to face them and to figure those things out. So first, we'll talk about new versus old, experts versus beginners. Something I saw that worked at Spotify was having sort of like this onboarding call. So they just like gather a bunch of designers, new joiners together. And when the new joiners sort of are on the call, you explain, oh, this is where this component is, this is what this color means, this is how we use tokens, and this is how everything is structured, right? But it was sort of like designed for expert level designers at using design systems. But one thing that crossed my mind was, you can't obviously solve onboarding for every single person at a specific level of detail. A nice to have would be to have, this is what you should know about the Spotify design system, but these are the other things that are important for you as a design system newbie in some sense. And you can click this couple of links because you can't always save all these things. These things are available online already, right? You can click these links and find out one or two things. Naming things. We all love naming things, right? More often than not, most design systems will have like a cool name. At Spotify, we call it Encore. I think Google calls theirs material design or material U. And it's nice to like find a nice name for things, right? But it's important to keep things as simple as possible, keep them straightforward and succinct. For example, this is simple text called heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, body 1, and body 2. Very, very simple. But when I joined Spotify, we had bars, because most things were like around music, and it took me a week to understand what those things meant, right? Yeah, it's very, very funny. But as time went on, I understood, oh yeah, this is bars, and this is ballad, and this is some mesto, and it made sense eventually, like all these things are around music. But for a newbie, it's like, I don't know what this means, but I had to use it, I had to work with them. But I hacked around and I figured these things out, and it made sense eventually, but for a newbie, you still don't know. Right. So as I said earlier, we tend to create these systems with the assumption that everybody understands what's going on. And we also create with the assumption that everybody has some form of progressive knowledge about systems already. But it's important that we build proper systems. That we build proper systems and always think about all these other people. Right. And this is a straight quote from someone I spoke with, Mustafa, who works at Meta. And he said like his biggest pain point is just the sheer naming of things, like looking for a component that is called tags or labels that do essentially the same thing, but at this previous company, they call them tags. And I moved to a new company and they call them labels, right? And I search for it and I can't find it, right? Or this fantastic component called a drop-down, but then has search in it, right? And it's like a searchable drop-down. But then sometimes when you add a checkbox to it, like multi-select drop-down with search in it, right? And Microsoft calls it a combo box, but it doesn't make sense. It's not it's a combo box in some sense, because like if you use Windows in the early 90s, that's what they called it. But I'm fairly young, I'm not 30 yet, so it's not a combo box to me. It's a searchable multi-select drop-down, right? So as such, when you're naming these things, in as much as you're going to give it a standardized name, you want to make sure that you have enough details and aliases in them, such a way that if I search for searchable drop-down, I can still find something, right? So I can search for drop-down, I can still find it, right? And then we'll talk about flexibility and completeness. This is my best friend, detach instance. Every single week, I detach something. People probably hate me for it, but it's just like the way things go. Show of hands, how many people uses this wonderful thing in Figma every week or every day? Don't be scared. Don't worry, it's fine. So I use it very, very often, and the reason for this is we tend to design for completeness, right? We want this one component that can do every single thing. And that's fine. I guess it's not fine sometimes, right? Yeah. So what I found is that it's fine not to have a complete component, right? You want to have like subsets, like say for example, this is my good friend here, this searchable drop-down multi-select stuff, right? It's fine to have a search component, and it's fine to have this drop-down side of it, and it's fine to have a text field, and give people the flexibility to actually attach these things together, right? And my reason for saying it sounds very crazy, but it gives people the feeling of like, oh, I own this stuff, I can do stuff with it, right? And there's this, maybe not the saying per se, but when you feel caged in, more often than not, you want to break free, right? And the reason why people detach components is because they feel caged in and they're finding ways to like express themselves or solve a user need or find a solution to a problem, right? So design for flexibility, but it's not compulsory to be fully complete, right? A fantastic thing that we don't cater for is when things change. So more often than not, when something changes, I see this fantastic pop-up at the bottom right corner of my Figma file that tells me, is it accept changes or something? And then it pops up an explanation of this has changed and this has changed, and I accept it because I'm very naive. And my Figma file basically scatters. And I have to start wrangling things together and fix my auto layout and break my auto layout and start moving things one by one. But yeah, when things change, it's important that we don't just change things for the sake of it, right? There is a feeling that you get when you start seeing inconsistencies in your file or in your product. It's like, oh, we need to consolidate everything at once. But maybe sometimes there's no need to consolidate everything immediately. Reason being, if you consolidate every single thing, you would have a very, very bloated design system, right? If you try to we need to componentize every single thing, you have a very bloated design system. So it's fine to embrace a bit of chaos, let things scatter just a little bit, and then consolidate later down the line. I'll give an example, right? Or a reason why this might make a bit of sense. So if you have a component where one team uses it fairly regularly because they combined this, and this together, and they use it for their work, there's no point adding to the main design system or to the design system at all because it has one use case. The moment you start seeing it pop up 4 or 5 times, then you can begin to say, oh, we should consolidate this, right? So letting chaos occur is good. And the upside of that is when you finally decide to consolidate things, you have a starting point. It's easier to start from 0.5 than to start from 0. Essentially means 1 or 4 different teams have worked on this thing in the past already, and you don't have to start fundamental research as much. You can pick from their code, pick from their designs, and pick inspiration from them. And that gives you a way to up-level your design system a lot faster, right? But if you don't embrace that chaos, it means that design system team needs to do all of that work and will not be able to lean on the team in itself. Right. There's the next exciting thing. I guess get a lot of quicker wins when the work is done by other teams. It's very, very fun when somebody else has worked on something and just pick it up and put it in yeah, we won. The other fun thing is documentation. And this is the art of design systems. There's this, maybe not a saying per se, but there's a notion I have where if it's not written down, it's not done. Because say for example, you tell me, oh, this is a card, but there's no way to explain the behavior of the card, the states of this card, and basically understanding when to use it and when not to use it, right? If it's not documented down, it means that I could use it anyhow I want to use it, and then you come out later down the line and say, oh yeah, we only use this card during onboarding. This is the different card we use when we're trying to sell stuff to a user or we're trying to complete checkout, right? So having a single source of truth is important. Having a source of truth that is set in stone and everybody can always trust is also very important. Having a source that can always trust is also very important. An interesting reason why documentation is good is when you have documentation, when you do full-blown redesigns or you have tweaks to your product, you can basically export it. Like more often than not, a button would always behave the way a button behaves everywhere, no matter what, right? So it's that one thing where sometimes when you do it once, maybe you tweak it once a couple of times, but it doesn't really change a lot, right? So it's those quick wins you can always have when you're updating your design system or when you're making changes to it, right? And the wonderful thing called governance. Governance is essentially how you manage your design system. Who do I go and meet when I want to make changes to the design system, or when I want to add something to the design system? Who is that person I need to meet? Or what is the structure in which changes happen, right? At my current company, we do governance is very interesting, and it's sort of setting the way the company is actually set, right? We have like a pod structure with like different squads, and within every squad group or different business unit, there is a design systems person or people that stay there. And there's like a core design system team, right? And the reason for that is that because of the uniqueness of each of this team or uniqueness of each of this product, it's important that we're feeding from a main source of truth, but at the same time, we give every product the ability to be flexible and to change and to basically do what they want to do because of the uniqueness of all of these things, right? I've also seen that quite a number of teams want to instantly replicate, oh, what does Dropbox do? Or what does Airbnb do? But the truth is, most times, we have teams that are fairly smaller, and as such, you want your design systems governance to be structured in the way your team is structured. And as your team evolves, you then begin to make those changes, right? So that it sort of replicates your organization. Oh yeah, wrapping things up, onboarding, basically how do people get introduced to the design system? How do people get used to it? Naming things, how am I able to find things efficiently? Flexibility and completeness, changing things, how do people know when things have changed? Documentation and governance. Thank you very much.